it.
Got him.
No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
With the second pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Von Miller, linebacker, Texas A&M.
He's the greatest ever, huh?
And then I just wanted
When you got all the advantages, it's easy.
Welcome to the Aggie War Pod, a product of Dave Campbell's Republic of Football podcast network. I am your co-host, Mike Craven, senior writer at DCTF. The other voice you'll hear on this podcast is a barbecue-eating machine who won't shy away from a road trip or an off-key rendition of Creed. The former Fighting Texas Aggie defensive line, I messed that one up. Defensive lineman arrived in College Station as a three-star prospect back in 2013. He now resides in Houston, but his heart never left. Ladies, gentlemen, reverently, I present the one, the only, Jay Arnold. I was bound to mess that up sooner or later. It took a year, but we'll just leave that one in as an error-filled intro.
Yeah, that's the natural part of this podcast that people don't get to see a lot. But I mean, again, like you said, it took you a year to kind of stumble over it a little bit. So I gotta say, just hats off to you, right?
Yeah.
Like that was a run almost like Penn State wrestling with how dominant
right.
you've been.
That's right. Yeah. For those who don't know, we don't do a ton of editing on this show. So like you are getting it usually how it is sounding for the most part. So we're authentic in that way. I've done pretty good on the intro because I have it written and I can read off a teleprompter. But tripped over that one. Been a long weekend for me. I'm still kind of getting back into the swing of things. So we'll give me a little bit of a pass there on that one. We are proud to be partners with Home Field Apparel. Use promo code WHOOP, that's WHOOP, for 15% off of your first purchase. They have a ton of stuff going on right now with March Madness. Even if you have all the Aggie gear in the world, I promise there's some cool stuff on there that you'll like if you go looking for it. Even if you don't know that you'll like it, you're going to stumble across a college that maybe you've never even heard of, and you're like, that's a cool shirt, and then you order it. That's kind of the Home Field Apparel experience. Please rate this podcast 5 stars and let your friends know about the podcast. We only grow with your help. If you'd like to help us grow as a podcast by advertising, please contact Jay or I in the Twitter DMs. Texas A&M spring practice began last week. The spring game is scheduled for April 20th. Also a busy weekend for Texas A&M basketball. Ultimately, out of the tournament after the second round, overtime loss to Houston. We will talk about all of that. If you're new to the show, we break this into 4 downs. Kind of give us just a vehicle to break up the topics. And first down, we're going to talk about players we're excited to see and hear about and read about over this spring practice for Texas A&M. Second down, we're going to talk about, is Conner Weigman the guy to take Texas A&M to the next level? He was announced as the starter by Mike Elko entering the spring. Third down, we will talk about Texas A&M basketball and how they did in March Madness. And then fourth down, we will do the Ask Jay segment where we kind of bounce around different topics, and we encourage you to send those in throughout the week. Jay, we're going to start with players we're excited to see, hear about, read about over the next month or so for A&M spring practice. We each kind of pick 3 or 5. We'll take turns kind of discussing why we're excited about them and what to watch. I will let you go first. Who is a player that you are excited to see, hear, read about during this next month of spring practice?
For me, I think the top transfer guy in the portal, the one that most people are most excited about, and you know, something that A&M has maybe struggled with the past few years with a true pass rusher, Nick Scorton, I think is the guy that I'm most excited to read about and just see what he does during the spring. Obviously, great numbers while he was at Purdue, and it's just kind of exciting to get that kind of player. And obviously, like we've already seen the productivity, so maybe not from that standpoint as far as spring practice, but just seeing him at A&M and seeing, you know, how he gets coached up and what he looks like in this Mike Elko defense.
I'm going to go maybe off the board a little bit. I'm going with Donovan Green at tight end. Probably not completely 100% healthy going into this spring. Obviously suffered that ACL injury a month before last year, and so they'll ease him back into that stuff. But that tight end room got crowded. You know, Garrett Miller, a couple other guys brought back there. Obviously, they lost Jake Johnson. But if Conner Weigman's going to be the starter, when we last saw Donovan Green in 2022, it felt like those two had instant chemistry. They came in the same recruiting class. They're both Houston area dudes, so I'm sure they camped together and 7-on-7 against each other, with each other maybe on those circuits. And so Donovan Green was quietly becoming the go-to option to Conner Weigman in 2022. Anais Smith had gone down to injury in that Arkansas game. And so true freshman to true freshman was a big thing. I think in Colin Klein's offense, the tight end is going to be involved heavily. That was true during the Jimbo era. I think we're going to see that continue. And Donovan Green can block. Like, he's not a spread him out, just 7-on-7 wide receiver cosplaying as a tight end. Like, the dude can block. And that feels like something Colin Klein and this new offensive staff is going to really value. So kind of hearing about Donovan Green's recovery, where he's at in that recovery, how much he's playing, where he sits in the pecking order of tight end is something I'm excited to hear about this spring.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Obviously, I think he was a big loss last year in the offense in the scheme of things. But I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball for my second player, Tristan Jernigan, the true freshman coming in early from Tupelo, Mississippi. Edgerrin Cooper obviously is moving on, and there's some transfers that have come in the transfer portal. But Tristan Jernigan feels like a guy that I think was underrated as a prospect. I think some of the offers and some of the attention he got from around the SEC, you look at that and you think maybe this guy could have been even higher up on the recruiting rankings. But he's a guy that I think has a potential to play right away, and especially when you look at what A&M had in linebacker last year, right? When you already have one guy that came in as a true freshman and kind of showed you how you can come in and play right away, and you have your other linebacker leaving in Edgerrin Cooper. I think Tristan Jernigan is a guy that I'm going to watch very closely this spring.
Yeah, we were kind of ahead of the curve on the Torian York talk. I feel like we were talking about it last spring, so maybe this is the next guy that kind of emerges from there. As you mentioned, they did bring in a couple transfer linebackers, Scooby Williams, Alex Howard, coming in. And so, I think that room, it doesn't have an Edgerrin Cooper, and that's going to be a loss, right? You're not going to replace a, second, third round draft pick at linebacker and be as good as you were the year before. But if Torian York continues, like if he gets even better, and those transfers come in, another freshman like Jernigan comes in, all of a sudden that room's deeper maybe than it was last year. And that's a good sign for the Aggies at the linebacker position. My next guy, I'm going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. I kind of figured you would go defense, so I would supplement that by going offense. That's knowing your partner, right? That's knowing the audience there. I'm going to go with Ruben Owens, the former 5-star from El Campo. Showed some flashes last year, but just never really got going as much as maybe we thought or expected he would, just because of that recruiting ranking. We've talked about this on the show before, like what that jump is for smaller division, smaller classification players. He went from being the fastest, best athlete on every single field he had ever touched with pads on to not that at the college level. And I think that's adjustment for him and all the other guys that come from that level. But what can he add to the offense, to the return game? Those are things that I'm interested about. His speed, athleticism, big play potential, feel like he would fit in or have a niche. So if he's taken that step from freshman to sophomore, what he looks like physically, all that stuff, Ruben Owens is one I'm excited to see and hear about this spring.
Yeah, I think we're both pretty high on Ruben Owens, and it feels like he's just kind of on the verge, on the cusp of a breakout year. If some things shake his way, obviously there's some other talent in the running back room, Le'Veon Moss, those guys, but it feels like Ruben Owens is the potential star right at the running back position. I am actually going to go offensive on this next one. We've kind of talked about this guy in the offensive line previews as far as most intriguing position battles. But he's a guy that has experience and played well at times last year. I'm interested to see if he can take a step up, and that's Demetrius Crownover at right tackle. So this kind of ties into those intriguing position battles, but it just feels like, he's 6'7", 315. Like, he is your typical offensive line. He's your typical tackle, your edge offensive lineman. And I mean, you've talked about the PFF ratings and how he did on that last year versus some of the other offensive linemen. But I feel like there's a lot of potential there, and he hasn't quite reached the level that he could get to. And I'm interested to see how he looks in this new look offense under Colin Klein this year.
Yeah, really athletic offensive lineman, played tight end a lot in high school. Another guy that came from a smaller classification when he came out, that's had to grow into a new position, grow in size, get used to handling humans that are as big and athletic as him. But if he this spring can establish himself as the dude at right tackle, that starts answering a lot of questions along the offensive line. Now, all of a sudden, Chase Besantis can be a full-time guard and can move to left guard and maybe solidify that side of the ball with him and Trey Zune. So, but if he can't, right, if Crownover's struggling, inconsistent, injured, whatever, all of a sudden now you're shuffling the deck. Maybe Besantis has to play left or right tackle if Reuben Fathery hasn't evolved at all. And now you're looking for guard, right? And so I do think Crownover's progression and his ability to be the dude at right tackle can be a big part of the puzzle for A&M on the offensive line. I'm gonna flip with you. I'm gonna go to the defensive side of the ball. I would have bet a dollar to a donut that you would have already said this guy's name, DJ Hicks, another former 5-star guy who around or behind some elder statesmen last year who didn't get a ton of run, wasn't expected to come in and be the guy. But with a new defense, a new coordinator, and Mike Elko obviously as the head coach, maybe with the clean slate and just talent for talent, he just wows to the point where you can't keep him off the field. I always, those 5 stars come in and we expect the world of them, and a lot of times they don't hit as a freshman, and then you kind of forget about them or think like, oh, maybe that person was overrated or we got that one wrong, and then they explode as a sophomore, and you're like, okay, well, there's the guy I thought he was going to be. DJ Hicks is a dude that I did the cover story on our Rising magazine before he graduated out of Katy Pato. It'll be interesting to see kind of where he is in the pecking order on the interior of the defensive line, because it's all the talent in the world.
Yeah. And I think to your point, that was just such a strength of the A&M defense last year with Walter Nolan, who's obviously moved on, and McKinley Jackson, who was kind of the elder statesman of the interior of this defensive line last year. But I think he was just kind of further down on the depth chart. And I also think that he played pretty well in the Texas Bowl against Oklahoma State when he did finally get kind of a chance to run out there. And you're right, he was on my list. I was trying to save him, but gonna go ahead and talking about him here. Again, just a guy that I'm really excited about. Another guy who I think played well in that Texas Bowl, staying with the defensive side of the ball, was kind of my backup pick in case somebody else got talked about, is Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. He's a guy that came in that same class with Walter Nolan, but I think he's been a little bit banged up. He hasn't really been healthy in his time at A&M, but it feels like, again, he's just kind of your typical 3-tech, right? Like big athletic defensive lineman, 6'3", right about 300 pounds. He's a guy that I always felt like was going to be a star as soon as he got healthy and got playing time. And we haven't really seen that yet, but again, we saw flashes of it in the Texas Bowl. And if he can stay healthy during the spring, he's a guy that I'm very excited about seeing out there and seeing if he takes that next step in his game.
Yeah, the interior of Texas A&M's defensive line is pretty interesting, right? You got Rodas Johnson coming in as a transfer, Albert Regis there, kind of waiting his turn. The Shamar Turner play more inside in this new iteration of this defense. Like you said, Brownlow-Dindy, DJ Hicks. A lot of really good football players there, but not anyone that's like just established as the dude, right? Like we think that they're going to be really good, that's a solid rotation, but none of them have really been counted on for 600 snaps a game or a year or whatever. And so that position is going to mean a lot, because it also dictates how good the linebackers are. If they step up and play really well, I think one of the reasons Torian York was able to have such an impact as a true freshman, he's playing against or playing behind a Walter Nolan and McKinley Jackson and those kind of guys. And so it all kind of sticks together. Defensive tackle is going to be interesting. I will go into the secondary. I'm going to go with Dalton Brooks. Kind of his evolution, what he is. Another guy who was a highly touted recruit coming in. He gets on campus. He's behind, Damani Richardson and some other experienced players that you weren't going to push off the field. It does feel like it's his time now, but you look at how many guys were brought into the transfer portal, and can he be a starter? Can he hold off some of those older guys that were brought in who feel like they're going to walk in and be the starter for a year? That's why you transfer to a program as a senior, right? It's to start. And so what can he do? How can he take that position or not take that position? He's going to be one that has a lot of upside, And we're going to see kind of what he is as the spring goes on.
Yeah, definitely a lot of competition there at the defensive backfield. I think that was another spot that we highlighted last week when we were talking about most intriguing position battles. You mentioned some of those guys that transferred in. Donovan Saunders from Cal Poly and Will Lee from Kansas State were both guys that I thought about talking about. But I think the guy who I'm most excited about in the spring is on the offensive side of the ball. Has had a little bit of an up and down tenor at A&M. There were some issues, I think, with Jimbo Fisher at times with him wearing sleeves and how much playing time he got. Feels like Mike Elko is going to be fine with whatever he wears as long as he does his job. And this is Moose Muhammad, of course, if you don't know what we're talking about. It feels like somebody needs to step up in this wide receiver core for the Aggies. Anaya Smith has moved on. Obviously, Evan Stewart has transferred out. There's Noah Thomas is another guy that I'm excited about, but it feels like this is Moose Muhammad's year to really shine in this wide receiver core. So that's the guy that I'm really excited about in that position this spring. I just kind of want to see him take that next step. Like, we have seen plenty of ability out of Moose Muhammad. I think some of the catches that he's already made have been impressive, but it just feels like we need that one next step out of Moose. And I feel like this spring is going to be kind of a hint of what's to come.
I think the inconsistencies drove the last staff crazy. And I don't mean just inconsistencies on the football field, like inconsistency in film and training and going to the weight room and doing all the small things that maybe you need to when nobody's watching to be an excellent football player. But the talent is there, and sometimes you just need a new boss, right? Like somebody comes in, has it a new way, talks a different way that maybe gets the message across, or time is ticking and the NFL draft is coming up on you, and if you don't get a big time, full, consistent year, those questions are going to hover against you. I think Moose Muhammad is a great one to put on here. He was on my list as well. I'm starting to do the magazine stuff, and so it's picking a first and second team All Texas. And Moose Muhammad's one that I am really flirting with putting on that second team offense, despite the numbers last year, just because if he does figure it out, and if him and Mike Elko, him and Colin Klein can get on the same page, there's not 6 other wide receivers in the state of Texas that are better than Moose Muhammad. Like he may end up a first team all Texas at the end of the season if he really does get on the same page as everybody. I think he's and imagine how much better that makes Noah Thomas and Cyrus Allen and some of those other players around them.
And Janae Walker is a guy that really shined last year that we haven't even touched on yet.
If an explosive electric player like Moose Muhammad is demanding so much attention from the defense, now all of those guys are singled up, and that's a win for Texas A&M. I'm going to go with my last one. That was going to be my last one, so I'm scrambling a little bit here.
This is revenge for DJ Hicks.
That's right. I'm going to go with Jared Kerr. I guess for me, a lot of these, now that I'm seeing the trend of myself picking these, a lot of these guys are former high school recruits from the state of Texas that I really like, that have kind of baked. They've kind of been sitting out, kind of getting their seasoning on them and stuff like that, and are ready to really make a difference. And with the transfer portal age, that's no longer a gimme. Like, we used to know who those next guys were going to be up. Maybe they didn't live up to the hype, but they had to be the next guys up because that was who on the roster. Guys like Dalton Brooks, guys like Jared Kerr, organically, they feel like they're next. They were recruited to be the guys to replace Damani Richardson and some of those other secondary players. But with the portal and with the ability to bring in 8 new players in the secondary in your first month on the job, now all of a sudden you have outside competition that you didn't have before. Do you get squeezed out? Does it make you a better player? If at the end of spring, do guys like Jared Kerr not like where they're at on the depth chart and they enter the portal, right? I mean, Mike Elko talked during his signing day deal that they're above the 85 scholarship limit because they know they're going to have some attrition. That's just how you go into the spring. And so guys like Kerr, guys like Brooks, and what is now a crowded secondary, it's going to be fascinating to see what the pecking order is come the end of April 20th.
Yeah. Again, it circles back to that secondary talk that we had about how many transfers have just come in, and just being intrigued by who's going to step through and shine, and who's going to, like you said, move on after the spring and where they see themselves on the depth chart. So Jared Kerr is definitely a good one to watch on this list.
If you're a Dalton Brooks, if you're a Jared Kerr, if you're one of those players who was highly recruited, who thought that their turn was next, right? And then you have a new coach come in and they bring in all of those players from the portal. What do you think your mindset is going into the spring?
You have to go out there and compete. I mean, it's really a chance to show that you deserve to have that spot, right? Like nothing's given, especially now, like you mentioned. The transfer portal age has changed it even more so, where it's not just get your licks in during your freshman sophomore year, and then when you're a junior, it's time to get out and go. Now it's like, well, every time spring comes around, like it is a chance to prove you deserve your spot, and to prove that you have put in the work to be trusted and to become the starter that you thought you were going to be whenever you stepped on campus. And then, I mean, obviously with the coaching change, that just, adds a little bit more of this is the job audition. So that's got to be your mindset if you're one of those guys coming in. Like it's do or die.
And if you're a coach, do you know how do you think these coaches go about finessing that situation, right? Where you're trying to find starters and you're trying to find dudes who are dogs, right? Who like want to go take somebody's spot and want to play every single snap. But at the same time, you also got to keep a roster together and know that your third string guy is going to want to go find somewhere else to play. Like, how do you go about managing those egos within the room?
I think you have to be a little bit transparent, first of all. I mean, A&M in particular has seen what has happened when you're not as transparent. Think about the quarterback room in 2015. You have to be honest with these guys. At the same time, there is a little bit of managing that relationship, right? Like there are some guys where they're not playing and you probably don't want them around.
Sure.
But there are other guys that, maybe they're not your starter, but they're somebody that can contribute, whether it be special teams or as a rotational guy. And I think you'll see more rotational stuff as far as the way the game has evolved and just like how important it is to have fresh legs out there. And I think defensive backfield is one of those areas of the field where you'll see rotation. Defensive line is a similar spot. So it's kind of sifting through the guys that you want to keep around and the ones that, maybe it's a little bit of encourage them to pursue opportunities elsewhere. But that can also be a positive. That doesn't have to be a negative, right? Like being honest with a player and saying, hey, like you're probably not going to see the field here. It hurts in the moment, but at the same time, it gives you an opportunity to say like, hey, I need to step back and reevaluate where I am in my career. And it can be something that helps you out going forward.
Yeah, it's another thing I want to talk about in the offseason, just like the lack of development, because like I would imagine some of that too is like, just stick with me, kid. Like I know you're third in the depth chart right now, but if you give me a year with you, like you're going to take that next step forward. And how much we're resetting that clock every single time that you transfer. Because I'm pro transfer portal in theory, right? I mean, like the coaches have free movement. Why shouldn't the players? It's college. Like most students transfer at least once. I mean, I don't understand why you're locked into that when you're not getting paid. But I do think there is a detriment to doing it all the time. Just like in work, if you're jumping a career every 6 months, you're probably not getting good at many things that you're doing. So moving on to second down. I wanted to include this player in the most intrigued or most excited to kind of watch this spring, and that's Conner Weigman. Mike Elko have announced that he's going to be the presumptive starter. Obviously, it is March 26th, and so if somebody, Jalen Henderson, lights it up and plays his way into the starting lineup, I don't think Mike Elko is going to stop him from doing so. But as of right now, Conner Weigman is going to be the presumed starter. Hats off, by the way, to Mike Elko for just like not being a clown and just being able to be like, yeah, I mean, like if the season was right now, Conner Weigman would be the guy. Like I don't know why coaches can't do that kind of stuff. Like you're not announcing him as the starter, just like right now he's taking snaps with the ones. So yeah, he's the starter. But I wanted to take it a step further. I think it's clear that Conner Weigman is the guy for Texas A&M. Like he is going to be QB1 as long as he's healthy and something wild doesn't transpire. My question is, I think, bigger than that, and that is to you, Jay. Is Conner Weigman the type of guy that can take Texas A&M from a 7-8 win team to a 10-win playoff type team? Do you see him as the type of quarterback who makes their team better, or is one of those quarterbacks that can drive the bus of a really good football team? Like, how do you kind of view him as a college quarterback?
I think the talent is absolutely there for him to be the kind of guy that can elevate Texas A&M. And I think he did it at points last year. Obviously, you had the game against Miami where A&M defensively couldn't get much going, but a lot of that keeping A&M in that game was Conner Weigman and his arm. Uh, you know, he gets hurt early against Auburn. Uh, the offensive line struggles, I think, limited what we saw from him last year. But there were points where he was flashing, obviously, extreme talent. You worry about how he's going to bounce back with lower body injury, another lower body injury, and what effect that could have on him, and how it'll impact this offense, right? Like that is something that you definitely have to worry about. Because again, we still don't fully know what this offense is going to look like under Colin Klein with Conner Weigman under center. That is something that could change. But as far as me and my opinions of Conner Weigman and whether he is a guy that can take A&M to the next level, yes, I think he's more than just a game manager type quarterback at the college level. I think he's one that will elevate this team.
I'm with you, and some of this is probably still recruiting bias and how I felt about him in high school, because I was still on the recruiting beat then. And remember, before Quinn Ewers reclassified and skipped his senior year to go make money from Levi at Ohio State, it was Quinn Ewers, Conner Weigman, Cade Klubnik were like the three, trilogy quarterbacks, and like everybody had their favorite, right? Like Quinn Ewers was the hype prospect we'd all known about since eighth grade. Cade Klubnik was winning multiple state championships at Westlake and kind of just like, robot quarterback guy just with the fundamentals and everything. And then Weigman was kind of the wild card where, he was leading this new high school Cypress Bridgeland to playoff wins in a way that we had never heard of them before. And he was a really good baseball player. And was he going to go to the MLB? Was he going to be a Kyler Murray type? But the athleticism was already there, obviously there. And his junior year run was one of the better high school quarterback runs I can remember in recent time. But he was injured as a senior. He was injured in 2022 when he first played at Texas A&M, right? He got injured in 2023. As somebody who went through some injuries, at what point does that become a real talking point about a player and their ability to kind of get through some stuff? Or in a violent sport like this, is it just always kind of a roll of the dice and it doesn't say anything about a person's ability to stay healthy, just more about, the inability to stay lucky by not getting a hit in the right way or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, there's always going to be this like concern about durability when you have had multiple injuries. I think that's overblown a little bit. And especially like in a case with Conner Weigman, I don't think it's been the same injury every time.
Right.
Like I think
Right.
they've been different injuries. Whereas if it's one injury happening over and over again, like in my case with my shoulder, where it was a multiple time deal, same shoulder, same issue, I think that's more of a knock on the durability of someone, right? Like when it's the same thing, because and not necessarily knocking the durability, but like, hey, maybe this, the human body is a ticking time bomb. It can only take so much. And I think that speaks to your second point where this is a violent sport. A lot of it is just the luck of the draw as far as, landing right or wrong. And I mean, when you look at like the injury that happened to kind of like, it was pretty clear he got rolled up on, right? Like that feels like one of those things that's going to be an injury for just about anybody. You know what I mean? Like there are certain injuries where it's kind of like, how did that happen? Other injuries where like, oh yeah, like this dude got rolled up on. Like this is a uh expected injury at this point, right? Like I think there's different probabilities. And again, I'm not a scientific mind. I was a marketing major. I try to do the least math possible, so I don't know what the statistical anomalies and all that are for injuries. But in my mind, uh, yes, there's durability questions, but that's for anybody, especially when you're playing quarterback and you touch the ball every snap.
Yeah, to your point, there are 13 FBS teams in the state of Texas. I looked it up earlier. Only two started the same quarterback every single game, and that was Texas State and Houston. Both offenses are snap the ball, get the ball out of your hands as quick as possible. Like they're not the type of offenses that get quarterbacks injured that often. The year before that, also two out of at that time 12 because Sam Houston had moved up, only 2 of the 12. So you're gonna get injured, right? Like, you got the ball in your hands every single play. The quarterback runs the ball now, and in most offenses at least a few times. Like, you're gonna get hit wrong, you're gonna catch a concussion, you're gonna roll an ankle, you're gonna do something that keeps you out of a game or two. I think A&M having some depth at quarterback, like experienced depth at quarterback, is a huge advantage. It'll be in Colin Klein's offense, at least the ones we've seen. The quarterback is at risk, right? Like, the quarterback is the 11th football player. Like, it is not 10 plus the quarterback. It's like total football and soccer, right? Like, the goalie is part of the game now. The quarterback is part of the offense when what we've seen from Colin Klein. And it's up to Conner Weigman to be smart, and take the yards when you can get them, and then also take the safety when you need to take the not the actual safety, but safety as a player when you can afford to do so. But also, as fans, you got to realize that this is a physical, brutal sport, and you might miss a game or two, and that's just like part of it.
Yeah, and again, part of your success over the course of the season is when those injuries happen. Just
Sure.
being honest, like, 'cause the injuries are going to happen. If you get a little bit of luck of when they occur, like if you have somebody get banged up before you play, a group of 5 team or an FCS opponent, it's obviously better than somebody getting banged up heading into Alabama or one of those places, right? It's definitely like you worry about injuries, but at the same time you focus on the controllables.
Yeah. Yeah. So Conner Weigman's played, he's had 8 career starts over 2 seasons, right? Started 4 games in 2022, started 4 games in 2023. I was looking through some of the PFF grades, and he's graded really high down the field. Like,
Yeah.
his grades get lower as they go down, but I can't figure out how they grade for behind the line of scrimmage, because he's perfect on throws behind the line of scrimmage and has like a 60.2 grade. So I have no idea kind of how they go about it, but his deep throw success makes me believe he's the type of guy who can make a team and an offense better, more so than one that is dependent on having better parts around him and then just managing those. I think he can. I think he can take the team to the next. I'll put it this way: I don't think Conner Weigman is going to be the reason Texas A&M can't compete for an SEC championship in 2024, if indeed they can't compete for a championship. I think if Conner Weigman is healthy for 12 or 13 games, it won't be the quarterback position we look at and go like, oh, that's why they were 8-4, or that's why they were 9-3, right? Like, I think quarterback is going to be a plus for the Aggies this year.
Agreed. I think we're both aligned on that point. And again, like we've talked about all of the questions and the intriguing position battles last week. Those are the positions that I think will affect whether A&M wins or not in 2024. I think Conner Weigman staying healthy is a question, but if Conner Weigman is on the field, A&M should do well.
And Conner Weigman staying healthy is also somewhat, if not a lot, dependent on one of those questions from last week, which is the offensive line, right? Like I think you look at A&M, like you look at the running back room: Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, Reuben Owens, right? Like that you win a lot of like that can win football games for you. A wide receiver room: Jade Walker, Noah Thomas, Moose Muhammad, Micah T, Cyrus Allen, Jare Barber. Like those guys, that's going to win you some football games. Those are guys, like, you're not deficient at wide receiver or at running back. Tight end is a plus position with Donovan Green, Garrett Miller, Trey Watson. You look at left tackle: Trey Zune's a really good player. Like, he's a solid left tackle in the SEC. If they figure out those other 4 spots, like if they can figure out a rotation of 5, maybe grow it to 7 along the offensive line. Do you think the A&M offense is more known in a bigger plus than the defense right now? Like, where do you kind of look at those 2 units, like, just off the snuff? Because when I'm talking about it out loud, it's dawning on me that, like, my questions about A&M, I don't think are offensive. Like, the offensive line is a big one, right? And you win or lose based on the offensive line. But I think I know more about the A&M offense than I do about the A&M defense. I guess that's maybe just because the defense is a little bit more transfer heavy.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, I think we know more about the A&M offense, but I still think offensive line is the biggest question all around.
Sure.
With that being said, there was a ton of turnover on the defensive side of the ball. We already talked about McKinley Jackson, Walter Nolan out, Edgerrin Cooper out. You also have Damani Richardson, who has been a part of this defense for, it seems like, for forever. He's gone now. So I think with more turnover on the defense, I do have more questions, but the biggest question overall for me is still the offensive line.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. I guess my thought process when I was thinking about that out loud is like everybody I'm mentioning is coming. Like I think A&M starting 11 could be all guys that played for A&M last year, whereas A on offense, whereas A&M starting 11 on defense is going to include 4 to 6 transfers. Like it just is.
Right.
Like Nick Scorton's going to start. Scooby Williams is probably going to start. BJ Mays, Trey Jones, Jaden Hill, like some of those guys are going to start in the secondary. Maybe that's why on paper I just know the players. Like I just know the faces on the offensive side of the ball, which can be good or bad, right? It can be a good and a bad thing. But yeah, that offensive line, especially like center, right guard, right tackle. Because I think Chase Besantis at left guard, I think I've talked myself into that being like a slam dunk move. So it's center, right guard, right tackle for me. I guess Cam Dewberry, right guard, probably. Well, we talked about most of this last week. So go listen to last week's show, and you can get the whole offensive line debate in there. We're going to move to third down. Talk a little Texas A&M basketball. We will admit off the cuff, this is not our area of expertise. You are not here because of our round ball knowledge, but we will talk some Texas A&M basketball. The Aggies beat Nebraska, thank goodness, in the first round of that play. That would have created a Twitter onslaught. That would have just been bad news for everybody. Beat Trev Alberts' old squad, 98-83 in the first round, dominating fashion. And then in what may be the game so far of the tournament, and I say this because it's the only game I was able to sit down and watch fully because of how busy I was Thursday through Saturday. 195 lost in overtime. A&M makes a furious comeback. Big knockdown 3 as time expires to send it into overtime. I thought that was over. I'm a big momentum guy. I don't know how you feel about this, Jay, but when they made that shot and you saw Houston's body language, it felt like Houston had lost that game. A&M had won that game, and I kind of thought that would continue on into overtime. But Houston's just good, man. That's a boa constrictor type basketball team. Really good. A&M scored 90 points in their final 4 games, at least 90 points in their final 4 games, but only went 2-2 in that span. Lost to Florida, obviously lost to Houston. 21-15 on the year, 99 in the SEC. We received this question for the Ask Jay segment, but I'm going to just kind of use it here for third down to kind of steer this conversation. What does Texas A&M basketball need to do in order to take the next step? And I guess first we need to define what is the next step. Like right now, A&M is a middle of the pack SEC program that gets into the tournament. That's where we're at. So the next step would be a consistent Sweet 16 second weekend type team. So what does Texas A&M need to do to get to that point?
I think it's consistency because part of it is A&M lost, yes, in the round of 32, but they lost to a number 1 seed, right? And you're not playing a number 1 seed if you play consistently to the level that you can play throughout the year. U of H is one of the best teams in the nation, I felt like. A&M had moments. They had flashes, right? You beat Kentucky in the tournament. You dominate Nebraska. Early in the year, you played pretty well to start the year. But then you kind of have dips and dives and areas of the year where you don't look good and you lose the teams that you should beat handily. So my thought is you get a better seed, first of all. You get to like a 6 seed or a 5 seed. And that's kind of taking the next, because you're not playing a Houston, a U of H in the second round of the tournament. You're getting, it's still going to be tough because this is, again, next to maybe Omaha, the toughest tournament in postseason sports. As far as, anybody can get hot at the right time. But I think the consistency is the major key in taking that next step. Also, free throws, which, to be fair, could be considered a part of that consistency.
Yeah, Buzz Williams overall in his last 5 appearances in the tournament is 3-5. He led Virginia Tech to the Sweet 16 in 2018, 2019 before he came to Texas A&M. Has not made it out of the first round of the tournament in the other 4 appearances. 2 at Virginia Tech, the last 2 years at A&M, obviously last year. A really good regular season, right? When I think 15-3 in the SEC, but then bounced in the first round. And that's what's hard about being a basketball coach, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see how the narratives change in college football because of the expanded playoff. What you do in the regular season doesn't matter all that much, right? It gives you, like, to your point, it gives you better seedings and better matchups in the tournament, easier route in theory to get to that second weekend. And then once you're in the second weekend, it's just play some basketball and hopefully you win 2 games and see what happens, right? But last year they were 25-10, 15-3 in the SEC. That was second in the conference, like really good basketball team. But you play one bad game, you lose in the first round, and the perception and the noise outside of your program just completely ratchet up. He's going to be entering year 6 as the head coach next year. He's won 61% of his basketball games, over 50% in the SEC. Here's my question, and I don't know the answer to this. I'll admit that off the top of my head. Where are the investment levels for A&M basketball compared to football? Because we see the recruiting that A&M does on the football field, and this is a dummy asking a question. It appears to me that if A&M got behind the basketball program in a way that is behind the football program, the talent level jumps up a notch or two, and then all of a sudden you're with Kentucky, you're with those two, you're with because the investment level is there. I don't see A&M recruiting at a huge level, right? I don't ever hear of major 5-stars going and playing basketball at A&M. I don't hear of major transfers kind of going to A&M. A&M's got enough money to pay Jimbo Fisher $86 million to go away. It's got enough money to build cathedral after cathedral on campus. Got money to take Trev Alberts from Nebraska, right? Like put $4 million more into that basketball roster, and that's how you take the next step. Like the answer is easy now. Right? Like get your head coach. And I think Buzz, I mean, I have a hard time saying that the guy who like won a national championship at Marquette can't like win tournament games at A&M. If his roster is one of the top 10 to 15 in the country and A&M's getting bounced in the first weekend, fire. Right? But like right now, if your investment level is mid SEC conference table, you're going to get mid SEC conference table results. And that's kind of where it feels like right now, where they want Buzz to be a top 15, 16 program when they don't want to invest in it as a top 15, 16 program.
Well, and part of the problem too is I think basketball is really third on campus for sports.
Yes.
I think football is a clear number one, but baseball is the second.
Dude, track and field may be in front of basketball in terms of like pride at A&M. Like A&M cares about track and field as well. So yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's a pecking order situation.
Yeah. So, and I think Reed Arena, like this isn't going to necessarily impact recruiting, but Reed Arena could use an update, right? Like, that's just kind of the way it is. But yeah, I do think like some of the investment, if A&M just cared more about basketball, I think it would help in that recruiting aspect and bring more. You can get good crowds at Reed Arena, but it's just not consistent.
Yeah. And well, yeah, I mean, you can't just tune in March and expect your team to like be awesome, right? Like it's like we've seen how hard it is to compete at the football level with all that investment. Like that doesn't guarantee success. I'm not like Kentucky's underachieving right now and they got all the investment in the world, but it starts there. And the quickest way in the modern world to improve your roster is just to give it more money, right? And so people go play at A&M. We've seen that in every single sport, baseball, track, football. But to your point, like A&M doesn't care about it as much. And like, that's what gets recruits and players there is money and passion. And right now, men's basketball is just not at the top priority of Aggie land. And until that is true, it's going to be inconsistent results. Like that's just what it is in a sport that offers inconsistent results to nearly everyone on a yearly basis, just because of the crapshoot of the tournament and how much weight we put on that versus the regular season. I do think I think Buzz Williams is going to be back next year. I don't think Trev Alberts is going to walk in and make some kind of weird change right there. So we will see Buzz Williams for one more year. And I do think if he doesn't get out of the first round, there's going to be a lot of heat to get rid of him, just because sometimes you just got to make a change to make a change, even if it's not going to bring a lot of different results. It's a fundraising exercise at that point. Let's move to fourth down in the Ask Jay segment of the show. The first question: this has been the best start to a NASCAR season since ...
Man, I had to really rack my brain for this one, but I think I'm gonna go with 2011. 2011 was a really interesting year, and it ended great too. But you start the year with the Daytona 500. Trevor Bayne, who is driving part-time for the Wood brothers, the iconic number 21 car. He ends up taking the Daytona 500, 20 years old. And it kind of set the tone for the year, which would end with a tie. And I can't remember exactly what the criteria was, but Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards are tied on points at the end of the year, and Tony Stewart wins the championship because of the tiebreaker. This has been an incredible start to the year for NASCAR. You start off with a Daytona 500 that's extremely exciting. You head to Atlanta and maybe have one of the best races of all time, 3-wide finish decided by like a thousandth of a second. You have a really good battle between Tyler Reddick and Kyle Larson at Las Vegas. Phoenix wasn't great, but that's Phoenix. That's just kind of what the track is. Bristol had the most ridiculous tire wear situation I've ever seen, and it created like an old school NASCAR race. And then you had Circuit of the Americas in Austin, where the field got kind of spread out and opinions a little bit divided on it. But you had Christopher Bell chasing down William Byron in the closing laps and was within a second at the close of the race, which, I mean, you compare that to like what happens in Formula One, where the race is decided by 5 seconds. If you're within a second, I mean, that's really a thrilling conclusion. One more lap, and I think Christopher Bell passes him. So you give me all of these races, you add them together, and I think this is the best NASCAR start to a season since 2011.
I also did some research there. Agree with you completely. I'll move on from there. 10 more games in the English Premier League season. Obviously, we are both big European English soccer fans. 1 point separates Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man City. Arsenal with 64, Liverpool with 64, Man City with 63. For those who don't know, if there's a tie, score differential, goal differential is what dictates that. Right now, Arsenal would win on that. They have blown out some teams as of late. You can tell Arteta knew that, obviously knows that is the case and wants that edge. And then for the 4th spot, also for those who don't know, really the top 4, winning is awesome, right? Winning is fun, but you really want to be in the top 4 is really the goal, because you're trying to get into the Champions League. So being 4th is as good, in my opinion, as being 2nd, right? Aston Villa with 56 points, Tottenham was 53, are in a race for 4th. How do you see the top 4 ending at the end of the year in order?
Man, it's tough. We'll start with the 1 spot. I think it's going to be Man City. I just think there's too much talent there. I feel like that is probably my clearest answer.
Yeah.
On my little crystal ball here. You go to the 2 spot. I hate to do this, but I'm going to go with Arsenal in 2nd. I just think Liverpool and some of the injuries that they've dealt with, maybe some of the depth isn't there for Liverpool. The wild card there is it's Klopp's last season up there, so that could light a little bit of a fire. But I just feel like Arsenal is going to come out on top in that battle. So Arsenal 2, Liverpool 3, 4th spot. Man, I don't trust this Tottenham squad yet under Ange Postecoglou. It's been so up and down, and they have a chance to win and close the gap a little bit, and you lose 3-0 to I can't even remember who it was at this point in their most recent match, but I just think Aston Villa, in the way they're playing, they've been in better form than Tottenham, so I think I have to put Villa at 4th.
Ours are going to be relatively similar. I have Man City winning. I am a huge Liverpool fan, as you can see right here over my shoulder. I just can't. That roster is just too good. Their depth is too good. They did this last year. Arsenal was up, I think, like 10 points with 10 games to go. And then all of a sudden, Man City won by, 6 or 7 points. So I think it's going to be similar to that. They're going to win every single one of their last 10 games and put too much pressure on Liverpool and Arsenal to keep up with that. I do think the Klopp bump gets Liverpool to 2nd. I think they push Man City till the end there. I think their schedule is a little bit easier than Arsenal's. Then obviously they have something more to play for. And they know this is kind of the end of an era, right? Like Virgil van Dijk's 30-something years old. He may move on after this. Alisson's 30-something years old. Mo Salah may go play in the Saudi Arabian League or something like that for, $500 million pretty soon or something. And so this may be the last time, whereas Arsenal is going to have that core group around, including Arteta, for a couple more years. I have my opinions of Arsenal as a soccer team. I think they're a little bit immature to compete at this kind of level so far right now. It's hard to win these kind of soccer games down the stretch when you're like on the ground rolling around from being touched. And I think some of that they get it from Arteta, right? Like their coach is so high strung all of the time that's hard to sustain, right? Like that's hard. You can't like Pep is so even keeled that it works over a 38 game stretch, right? I think it's why he's never been a great European championship coach. Is he is more of a over the span of time type coach, and it feels like Arteta is more of like a one game, big game type coach. You saw the celebration after they beat Liverpool in like February or something like that, and so I just don't trust them to like be consistent enough to do this over the next 10 games because I think out of the 30 points you're going to need 27 to win. Like I do think that these teams are going to approach the 90-point mark, and you're going to have to be almost perfect down the stretch to win this thing. So I got Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, and then I'm going with Tottenham. I think just the talent alone, like I think Tottenham is going to make up that gap. That is going to be your final four there in the English Premier League. It'll be a lot of fun to watch over these next couple of months. If you're looking to get into soccer, now is the time to do it. This last month of the English Premier League is going to be badass.
Yeah, I certainly hope that you're right. I think it's just, between being an A&M grad and a Tottenham
I
supporter,
totally get it.
I just
totally get
expect
it.
the worst.
I can't pick Liverpool to win this thing, right? For the same reason. I just can't. I've seen them finish with 96 points and lose it, and 98 points and lose it, I think. So, like uh, Ferguson at Man United never scored or never got to as many points as Klopp has twice while losing a championship.
Yeah.
Like that's how good Man City has been over these last years. There's just no margin for error. Before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you about a new rule in the NFL, the drop tackle. You play rugby, you played defense in college, right? So you are uniquely equipped to talk about this rule specifically. Kind of what are your thoughts on the drop tackle rule itself? And how well or not well do you think it will be enforced on a week-to-week basis?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to be really challenging to enforce.
Yeah.
I do like that they're trying to place an emphasis on player safety. I do think this is a tackle that has led to lower body injuries at a high clip, similar to like a horse collar tackle where guys are getting hurt and it seemed like the safe thing to do. The issue with it is that I think the hip drop tackle is a little more difficult to enforce than the horse collar tackle is.
Yeah, harder to spot.
I think it's going to be harder to spot, and also just, man, it's a tough position for the defensive players to put themselves in, to try not to do that hip drop tackle. So I do like overall, I'm going to err towards the side of player safety and think this is a good call. But I think there's a lot of tinkering that's going to take to get to where it needs to be on this tackle. And some of that's going to be in practice, some of that's going to be in game and the referee seeing it. But it's your point that you always say it's perfect is the enemy of good. I think this is a good change overall.
Yeah, I don't have too many opinions on this because I haven't played football at that high of level, and I'm not making millions of dollars to keep my ankle intact and stuff. And so I always get tired of like the people on their computers talking about how soft something that they couldn't physically handle has become. Like it just bothers me. I get why making a sport that you love a little bit different or adding some rules can be annoying, but we want to see our best players play on Saturday and Sunday. Like that's why they're getting paid the most money. That's why we tune in. And if this can help, injuries on those kind of tackles, then do it. I agree with you. It's going to be frustrating for a year or two, right? Like we're going to have to train ourselves into that. And like defenders are going to have to train themselves to not tackle that way. But we've overcome so many rule changes in the sport that everybody said was going to ruin it and make it soft. And they were going to turn off the channel because it's no longer football. But we watch more than ever, right? I mean, like you go back and watch the hits that were allowed in the 90s compared to what's now. And it doesn't even look like the same sport, but the ratings are up. We didn't go away. Like none of those guys are soft. Like Aaron Donald's not soft, right? And he played in the NFL for a long time. So I think it's going to be fine. I think we'll get used to it as viewers. We'll bitch about it on Sundays and we'll complain about the first couple of bad calls and extra reviews. But over time, just like with the horse collar and anything else that's been in play in the NFL, we'll get used to it as viewers. We'll get used to it as football players. Guys will start learning how to do it, in high school and college. It'll trickle up. So I don't think it's going to be the thing that ruins your favorite thing. But it will be inconsistently called, at least for a little while. But Yeah, I think the sport is going to be fine. I think the bigger rule change is the new kickoff rule, and not even because of, for those who've watched the XFL and stuff, they've seen the new kickoff in play. But you have to announce if you want an onside kick, and I guess in the NFL there's not a ton of those surprise onside kicks, but I always go to back to that Bears Saints Super Bowl, right, where the Saints came out at halftime and snuck a possession and really changed the momentum of that football game because of that, and that will be gone. But I overall with the kickoff thing, I would just like them to eliminate it and just start the drive at the 25 and let's just move on with our life. That would be my, if we hate the kickoff so much, let's just put the ball in 25 and let's play.
Yeah, it's the the high speed collisions downfield where you worry about the neck injuries and things of that nature that have led to this. And I've watched XFL. I covered it last year for Apollo, and I actually enjoy this kind of kickoff. There's still the potential for an exciting play, but you definitely are cutting back on those just high speed collisions that lead to a lot of injuries. So ultimately, I think this is as fine as, and it doesn't change the fundamentals of the game too much. Like you said, there's an occasional surprise onside kick, but it's been a long time, I think, since we've seen one of those. So ultimately, yeah, most of the time, somebody's going to onside kick when they do it.
Yeah.
So I don't really think that affects too much here.
More kickoffs on concussions or more concussions on kickoff return than on any singular play the rest of the game.
Yeah, and so you're still going to have some injuries, again, physical game, but I do think that this one is really going to be a less difficult rule change than the hip drop tackle is. I think teams are going to adapt to this a lot, and I think it's been talked about as something that's been coming down the pipeline for longer than the hip drop tackle has as well. As far as I think we've heard rumors of kickoff changes for a long time.
I think you've seen a lot on kickoffs. It'd be more smaller kind of slot receiver type bodies. I think we're going to see more running back type bodies with the rule change as well. Maybe bigger, stronger guys that can get that extra 3, 4, 5 yards rather than just the speedsters that are trying to race the outside. That's what I've noticed in the XFL. It's more running backs than little small guys. It'll be different than a punt return, for example.
Yeah.
So, anyway, Jay, great show. We will be back next week to talk more Aggie spring football as we hear more from Mike Elko and the players and the reports behind the scenes, obviously, and stuff. And so thank you, sir. And we will talk to you next week. What you got going on this week?
This week it's Easter, so headed back to home to see the family in Rockwall, and just gonna keep watching March Madness, right? This is still a really fun tournament, and excited to see how it all shakes out.
I'm third in my office pool. Tied with me in third is Greg Tepper's son, who is 5, who made his picks. So the people who really pay attention to basketball are in 12th and 15th and stuff. I love March Madness because I've become the person I used to hate when I was younger, who is just picking teams on vibes and beating people, and it cracks me up. So I do enjoy that.
Yeah, my BYU pick didn't work out too good.
It did not work out. All right, sir. We will talk next week. If you have any questions for the Ask Jay segment that you want us to talk about, or topics about A&M, right, football that we can use in first, second, or third down, please send them to us on social media. Please like, subscribe, share, rate this show on the Republic of Football feed. For Dave Campbell's, for Jay Arnold, and Mike Craven, we will talk to you next time.